do we approach Gen Z with the gospel? Hi everyone, this is Lenny with Come Let Us Reason Together. You know, it's been a question asked for decades at least, ever since the Jesus revolution of the 60s. Churches have been wanting to get young people more engaged and worried that the faith given down from the saints would somehow falter in the next generation. Of course, the next generation is supremely important in passing on our cultural understanding as well as our beliefs. But today, something seems off. The new generations we're seeing falling away from the faith more than previously. Everyone's heard of the ex-evangelical movement or the deconstruction and deconversion that's taking place among young people today. Even kids who have been reared in the church going to service with their parents in their younger years seem to be fleeing. A recent Lifeway study shows that possibly up to 80% of kids who had attended church with their parents are now not attending church anymore, identifying as a nun. So what do we do about this? Well, that's the topic of this week's podcast, where I'm once again in the studio with the apologetics.com guys, talking with Dr. Harry Edwards and Stand to Reason's Jonathan Noyes about this question. What are ways that we can engage with Gen Z and tell them and show them the attractiveness of the gospel? How do they understand these things, and how can we better communicate in such a strange 21st century world? I hope you enjoy this discussion and learn a lot about how you can reach out to the younger generation on this Come Let Us Reason Together.
Well, welcome to the apologetics.com radio show. You always get shocked, John. Where we challenge believers to think and thinkers to believe. I'm Harry Edwards, your host for this evening. And if you're listening to us right now, we are live. So you might be driving home or driving to work or tuning in over the internet. We are live. And tonight I'm joined in the studio by my good friends, John Noyes and Lenny Esposito. How are you guys doing?
Really good. Really good. Excited to be here.
Yeah. Typically, we would have Jason Gallagher, but I'm glad, Lenny, you were able to join us.
I like Lenny way more.
Yeah, all right.
I mean,
Don't tell Jason that.
Way
right?
more.
Jason doesn't know where I live yet, so that's okay.
Yep, so it's the fifth Saturday, but, we call it Friday, so I can say good evening, right?
I that's the way I roll.
Yeah,
until I go to sleep.
It's
not
evening.
the next day. So if I stay up for 24 hours, the world really hasn't.
Yeah. So what's our topic tonight, guys?
Lenny?
Well, we're trying to figure out how to reach Gen Z.
Yes.
The elusive young demographic that every church pastor seems to be salivating over, yet nobody knows how to talk to.
Yeah. And so
I
tonight,
love the way you just phrased that, man. Every church pastor's salivating over these Gen Zs. This phenomenon. It's like the elusive, Sasquatch.
That's right.
It's the Bigfoot of the Christian community. There's
Got a
been
bag
sightings, but no pictures.
you have kids that are Gen Z, right?
I do.
Yeah.
My youngest is 21,
Yeah.
so he's right. And my actually, I have 4 boys, and so the number 3 is 25, so he's like right at that. He was born in '96. That's the start of the Gen Z cusp. I have 2 millennials and 2 Gen Zers. Yeah, and then I've got a granddaughter, of course, as well, who's very young.
You started young.
Granddaughter.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. How old?
She's 8. Believe it.
Oh my goodness, you have like
I have a 30-year-old
girl granddaughter.
the first girl. See, my wife was part of the Moab tribe, mothers of all boys.
Nice.
But we got the granddaughter.
I love that.
So,
that's really funny.
All right, gentlemen. So
Good for you,
the
man.
title
Wow.
of our
great.
topic tonight is How to Reach Gen Z with the Gospel.
Yeah.
All right. And this is going to be fun, gentlemen.
I think so.
So
I'm salivating.
you're salivating.
I am one of those salivating masters.
By the way, we've got a couple cameras here, so at some point this is going to end up on YouTube. And if you are watching on YouTube, give us a like and subscribe. That just helps the algorithm. And
they should do a lot more than that, Harry. You know what they should do is they should go to apologetics.com and they should click that donate button.
That's right. I love it. Yes. Yeah. If you appreciate our program, please do that. That helps us a lot. We are a volunteer ministry. I'm hoping to be part-time this year. So
for the first time ever, right?
First time ever, yeah.
In like, it's been like 250 years.
Yeah, 22 years.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, for all of our dear supporters, I will be sending out a support letter at some point, and you guys will know what we're doing here at apologetics.com.
You know, it would be really great if a bunch of people hopped on board. Like, we didn't talk about this before the show, and I don't want to waste too much time on it, but it'd be really great if a bunch of key supporters hopped on board early and really launched this ministry, this opportunity, like into the next like phase with you trying to raise some support. So if you guys haven't ever given, we'd love to have you support us for the first time. If you've given in the past, now's the time to kind of re-up, and because some major things are happening. If you guys have been to the website, it's been redone. If you've been to the YouTube channel, we have that up and going now. So
you've got a certificate program.
A certificate program.
That's
Dude,
right.
This is like,
we got merch now. We got merch.
I mean, this is no joke. See, this is what happens when Harry goes all in.
That's right, man.
You know, but it'd be great to be able to launch you out, you know, into this next phase with a good base of support.
That'd be great.
And the only way that happens is through our listeners. Yeah. So I'm hoping that can happen.
I'd love to give you guys stipends. And
nah, man. Yeah. That would mess everything up. Then I'd feel obliged.
Yeah. Dinners are fine, right? No, you even paid for my dinner tonight.
Well, right now, you can't fire me.
Yeah.
So it's like, I mean, I'm beholden to no man. Anyways.
Well, thanks, John, for that. All right, so let's get into it. Who are Gen Zers? Who are they? We already said they're the ones born between 1996 and some people would say 2010. I want to extend it to 2015. Just because. By the way, when you suggested this topic, Lenny, I was excited because I know a thing or two about this. I did my dissertation on this. So
he's throwing that around.
That gives it about 19 years, which is an average for a generation. Because past generations have been about
Gen X and the millennials. They've been pushing 15-year cusps. But prior
between
to that,
15 to 20, yeah.
Prior to that, the baby boomers, the greatest generation. Those were usually 20-year chunks.
That's right.
46 to 64 defined the baby boomer generation. So the 19, 20 years or so.
All right. Well, who wants to start? Who are the Gen Zers?
Well, obviously, the biggest differentiator between the Gen Zers and all previous generations is they are a thoroughly connected generation. They're growing up in a world where the smartphone was available to them from infancy. And you see it today. You see mothers with young 2-year-olds in strollers pacifying them through an iPad and a digital device.
Right.
They've never known a world without that, which means instant gratification, digital messaging is part of their understanding of how the world works. That's the biggest differentiator. Even the millennials, although they came into the world fairly early in the digital revolution, they still have, quaint recollections of AIM.
Dial-up, They probably had some dial-up or DSL.
Some had dial-up, but you didn't have, like with our kids, they didn't, as elementary school kids, have phones.
Right.
Yeah. They had a family computer that you could go to and access, but it wasn't 24/7.
And even that was like super limited. I mean, nobody had an email. Like, you didn't email your friends and stuff like that. No. It was like, you could go play 1 or 2 games online.
We had a rule that we wouldn't buy them a cell phone until they were at least 14, and that was because they were having some homeschool classes on a campus that was away from us, so we needed to be able to contact them when they were done or if something was early. But it was that kind of a deal. Now it's.
I mean,
I don't know if we're like so they're The digital natives, right?
Yes.
So that's what we're getting at. The
true
digital natives. But there's also some other things that stand out in my mind. For example, this is just stuff that I read in preparation for the show. Is they're the most educated, or I'm putting in scare quotes, well educated.
Formally educated.
Because
formally
information,
educated is a good way to put it.
I see. Because information is at their fingertips.
Yeah, and well, they're also. I mean, they're all going to college.
Yes.
They're all. I mean, whether or not the education.
They come from backgrounds where because the Gen Xers had a higher percentage of individuals who had gone to college. It's a percent of the population, and now the Gen Zers are even more so. We're finding that they're going to college at even higher rates. Women, especially.
Yeah.
What we're seeing is there's a lot of there's a drop off for boys, especially first, second year of college. But yes, they at least attempt the first couple of years.
Yeah, and they're also okay.
I was just going to ask: are we all Gen Xers here? I forget.
No, I'm actually. I was born '64, so I'm at the edge of the baby boomers. Although,
oh my gosh,
yeah.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
So,
I didn't know that either.
You're older than I am. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know what I am. 79. I have no idea.
Gen X. So
Gen
we're
X.
both
Gen X. All right.
Yeah, I'm an older Gen X, but
Yeah, and the other thing that stands out in my mind with this generation is so they're digital natives. They're really well educated. It's also as far as ethnicity, they're the most ethnically diverse group of.
So for the first time, if they go and attend kindergarten, they look to the left or to the right. More than likely, it's not going to be a white person.
Yeah.
It's again, all cultures, all ethnicities.
Much more integrated.
Yeah. And you know what? That's to me, that's one of the best features of Gen Z for me, because I don't think racial issues are going to be as predominant and as forceful for them.
Well, that's an interesting statement because, again, from my reading, and you guys probably know way more about this stuff than me. This isn't my.
No, you're an expert, John.
This isn't my field, but. From at least Pew research that's coming out on Gen Zers, is they mirror the views of who's the generation right before them? Millennials. So they mirror on social issues. They mirror millennials. It seems like so, which is interesting, I think, to me, because while they're the most diverse, they're the most educated. They mirror the same views as on social issues as the generation before them. So I don't know what that means, but it's just
I think part of that one has to do with the other. So if they are the most formally educated, they're running through the same educational systems as the millennials, and those educational systems have overwhelmingly offered a unitary viewpoint on many social issues.
Sure.
So I think, and they're believing what they're being taught. And because they're hearing it consistently, they're hearing it now in media, they're hearing it now in their classrooms, and they're hearing it now from people that
Well,
they
who
trust.
was that young girl that was just so...
Greta Thunberg? Is that who
yeah,
you're
that's
thinking
right. Yeah, she's a Gen Zer, and she was totally into major causes. I forget what...
She was climate change.
Climate change was her main
She's Swedish, actually not even American. You're talking about someone from Sweden who stood up and actually
Greta.
believes... Oh, Greta Thunberg.
Greta, yeah.
Sorry. And actually believes that the world is in peril. And this is another thing about Gen
I think
Z.
that she had some stuff going on too, like autism and stuff like that, right? I mean,
I don't know. I do know that she is still a cause celebrité in many circles because she's on the right side of that issue as far as most of the media is concerned. So, but Gen Zers, there's a blurring between entertainment and fact. I think that's true. One of the other things that I think is really key, though, because Gen Z are digital natives, they really understand when they're being marketed to.
Yes.
Because they're being marketed to all the time.
That's right.
And one of the problems our church has, and I don't want to jump ahead too far, but one of the problems our church has is we try to market to these kids.
Put a pin on that one. Yeah, that's good.
And
right.
boy, they know it. They
know it.
They can spot it in an instant because they've grown up with it.
That's right. And I think they're more discerning when it comes to information. They're just not going to imbibe everything that's been fed to them. again, because they're so used
Well,
to.
they definitely want to. Interestingly, there was an article, a study that Barna's doing, and one of the things that came out with Gen Zers as well as millennials was they want more depth in teaching.
I saw that. Yeah, I read that.
And that's interesting as well. So again, they want
that fits.
They're
though.
seeking.
Yeah.
They're seeking realism, and if you've grown up in a digital world, you understand what's outside the frame, right?
A couple things I want to add to that that's related to what you said, Lenny. So yeah, they are being marketed to a lot because they are the largest consumer group as well. 40% of everything that's bought, I guess, is bought by Gen Zers.
Oh my gosh.
40%. Yeah, and they happen to be also the largest population
That's insane.
in the U.S., but even globally, apparently. So now it makes sense that at this day and age, pastors need to be thinking about strategies on how to reach them. The other thing on my research, to me, it's alarming. It's a critical point, in my opinion, for church leaders. But did you guys know, and you guys probably know, only 4% of them grow up with a biblical worldview.
I believe that.
Only 4%. So
I'd argue it's less, but yeah.
Yeah. Less than 4%. Huh? So, I mean, you can imagine, right? If you mention Adam and Eve or Moses or David and Goliath or Bathsheba, whatever, Jesus.
Yeah. Any of those references.
Yeah. They're going to be scratching their head. And so it's good and bad. All right. Right. I mean, bad that we've slipped away from our Christian roots, but the good news is, really the harvest is plenty. It's ripe for the picking.
Well, the fields are white, man. Yep. The fields are definitely white.
Okay,
but yeah, I think that's concerning.
I think you bring up a point, and that's another issue that you have to realize. Gen Z is a thoroughly secular generation. So it is completely, in the term that we've used over and over again, disenchanted. It has a really hard time understanding a world that has powers, beings that operates larger than themselves. That humanity isn't the pinnacle of all existence, and how they fit into that. And the sacred, therefore, is really foreign to them, really something that, while we may understand it in the church, they see church as an activity, not
that's really good.
As a sacred service.
Yeah.
And
that's really good, Lenny.
That's an important distinction that we have to overcome.
I know, John, this is your expertise. We know that young people, Gen Zers, are prone to anxiety and depression.
Yes.
Do you guys know where that came from?
Well, I would argue it goes to kind of like what we're saying is there's a thoroughly secular generation. So thoughts of transcendence in any regard, whether it be on meaning, purpose, morality, values, ethics, origins, anything is off the table.
That didn't help for sure. But when it comes to generational studies, they have these like three kinds of effect that help define a generation. One of them is called a period effect, actually. So if you can think of major earth-shattering moments in history, and you have a kid that that is going through their formation, and then they happen to be right in the middle of that, it deeply affects them. So what happened in 2007, 2008?
The economic fallout.
That's right. The Great Recession.
I would say I noticed this with the millennials in 2001. You've got early teens, and when September 11th happened, that rocked them. But
that's right.
I think the economic thing is part of it. I don't think it's.
Well, they don't have experience. They don't have experience. I thought.
Well, no, the parents.
The parents do.
Yeah, and so that became an issue in the family.
Yeah,
but
and
Gen
so
Z
therefore it affected the Gen Zers.
True.
They also have something that affected Gen Zers, something called COVID-19.
Yeah, we don't know the end of that yet. Yes. Yeah, when I wrote my dissertation, COVID had not happened yet, and I remember when COVID happened, I go, my dissertation is junk right now. Because that is a
just needs
period
another
effect.
chapter now,
Yeah.
right?
But here's another
that's a period effect.
Here's another interesting thing. Here's another shift that's happened. For most of humanity, children were understood to be individuals who needed to learn to conform to the family structure. In most families, you had a rigid authoritarian hierarchy. It's primarily patriarchal, primarily father-driven, where it says you march to what we do. We'll have dinner at 6:15. You'll have X amount of chores that you have to do. You'll have a little bit of free time, and you'll have your school work to do, and we're expecting you to get these kinds of grades. That held through maybe the 60s. And then with the Dr. Spock and all these things, a shift happened in the late boomers and the early Gen Xers. We decided that we didn't want to be authoritarians like our parents. We wanted our children to actually like us. And this was a almost a common thing. And so we started asking the kids, what would you like for dinner?
These are the boomers, right? The parents are
some
boomers.
Some of the boomers,
Yep.
and it fell through to Gen X.
Well, certainly Gen X.
And then it became, oh, well, I can drive through here, and then I can drive through there to get, and then number 3, I can drive through that for, I can please all my
Three
kids.
different, yeah.
And then it became mom structured her weekly schedule to make sure that Jenny hit her ballet class, that you got swim lessons, somebody was doing horseback riding. We started budgeting our time around our children.
Right.
We sent the message to our kids that we want to make you happy. And I think the Gen
No, that's
Zers,
true.
It's totally true,
I
Lenny.
think the Gen Zers believe that. And when they don't feel happy, guess what they do? They say, it's because of the way I was raised. You're not making me feel I need therapy. They're the most in therapy, right? Gen Zers are highly therapeutic, and they're trying to figure out
most
who they are.
Diagnosed. I mean, most diagnosed and treated with drugs.
And again, that came through schooling as much as anything else, right? You had the school counselor who started to have way more sway with students than before, because, are you feeling bad? Let's talk this through, your feelings. Well, what's your family structure like? Maybe you're a victim, and the rise in victimhood on top of all this. So you start to see, but like everything else, it has the opposite effect. If you try to make someone happy all the time, guess what happens? They become completely unhappy, and that's part of what I'm seeing.
Well, honestly, it's like the drug addict, right? It's the drug addict that keeps chasing the high. The happiness will persist for only so long, and then you're going to need more and more to make somebody happy.
And they never learned how to fail. You have to learn it. One of the things that failure teaches you is how to get back up again and keep moving forward. And if the parents prevent you from feeling bad and failing, then you never learn the lesson of, I can survive a failure and I can get up and of my own initiative, not blaming somebody else, do it again until I get better at it.
Yeah, and there's other things that like what you're saying is brilliant. I think the question that you originally asked, Harry, that we have something that we haven't talked about why this onset of depression and stuff like that has to do with the technology as well. Complete attachment to these devices, living in these they're literally false realities. I just wrote a bunch of stuff and have been doing a lot of research on cancel culture, for example, right? And what spurred it on is I'm a fan of Dave Chappelle. Like I don't love the wordings the words he always chooses to use, but I think he's really funny. And I don't know if you guys have been tracking with what's happening with Dave Chappelle.
Yeah, he's a comedian, right? That got canceled.
They're trying to cancel him, out of Netflix. And, he says, and I think he's brilliant on this. He says, I guess this is like not verbatim, but I'm what he says in the show. He's like, I guess I was canceled on Twitter. He's like, I don't care because Twitter's not a real place, and like I'm like, laughing so hard at that because it's totally true, but that's not what these Gen Zers, right. The Gen Z, their life is TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, where it's all a manicured existence. It's not real.
And again, how a like isn't really somebody liking you.
No,
and friends aren't really your friends. It's
there's no
backwards.
Personal relationship.
Yeah.
I'm reading a book right now, a fantastic book. I'm not going to be able to remember the name. It's on gender, but one of the things it's a secular author, and what she's arguing.
Is it Abigail Schreier's book?
Yes.
Yeah.
It has a picture of the doll with the hole in the stomach.
Right. I can't remember. I'm blanking on the title now.
Yeah,
it's a fantastic book, but she's arguing in it, and she says that like what we used to worry about bullying and stuff like that is actually turning out to be like a necessary part of adolescence,
right.
where especially among young girls, like you form these cliques, and we fight against cliques, right? But they would form these cliques at school. They get into arguments with other girls, and they'd have a bad day, and then they come home and they're separated from it. And they talk to their parents and they vent and they get advice, prayer and stuff like this. And then they go back to school and things get better or change, and they form these social dynamics where, okay, this girl says this, and all of a sudden you have an ally in this other girl, and you're learning how to navigate the world. Where now online, that doesn't happen. One, there's no separation.
Right.
The bullying, the nastiness never stops. Number two, you're not forming a real authentic relationship with anybody. It's also online, decisions are made in an instant. And then that's it. And there's no going back. Once the consequences are set in motion, they're set in motion. Once that picture is posted online, it's there forever. And right. So all of these factors, I think, lead into why the Gen Z is experiencing kind of the emotional crisis it is experiencing.
That's good. That's
Irreversible Damage is the
Thank you.
name of the book.
Such a great book.
Yeah.
Buy it, read it.
I know we've got like less than a minute, but I did want to add one more thing that is interesting. James Emery White, who's written on the subject, Meet Gen Z is the title of his book. He's got some really good stuff to say, but he actually did mention something I thought provocative. He said that Gen Z might be the last true generation. And before the show started, I kind of explained what he meant by that, because generations form around common things. But because
beliefs held in common, yeah,
that's right. But because of the rapid change in society and the globalization and everything, it just might not happen anymore.
We're getting so individualized and so splintered that you won't have enough commonalities within a group to make any significant difference.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. But James Emery White might have written that too soon because, again, COVID-19, right?
You never know.
That's one thing that's going to bind everybody together, this new generation. Anyways, I hear the music, and so that means we're coming up on a station break. So please stay tuned, and we'll be right back after a few words from our sponsors.
All right, let's get back to the apologetics.com radio show.
Well, welcome back to the second half hour of the apologetics.com radio show, where we challenge believers to think and thinkers to believe. And I am privileged to have my good friends here in the studio with me, John Noyes.
What's going on, man?
And Lenny Esposito.
Yeah.
You guys are just amazing. You guys drive like close to an hour to be here. So I appreciate you guys.
I do it just for you.
Yeah. It's a deep honor doing ministry with you guys. So we have been talking about Gen Z and how to reach them for the gospel. So I guess the first half hour, we tried to create a profile for Gen Z. And I think it's going to...
We're hugely successful in that, I'm just saying.
Oh, of course.
If you've missed the first half hour, you've got to rewind it and watch it, because...
It's going to be in our podcast in the next few days.
On the YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, on YouTube as well. Maybe I should since we're on YouTube now, I could hold up some of the books. If you have this book, this would be good if you want to understand Gen Z.
Gen Z by Barna.
I reference that book a lot. So how do we do it? Let's get to the practical part of this. I know, John, you're a pastor. Lenny, you run a ministry. You have Gen Z kids. Mm-hmm. You're around Gen Z.
Let's stand to reason. I mean, the whole Student
right.
Apologetics Conference, the Reality Conference, is all Gen Zers. It's nuts.
Yeah, you guys are just pros. You're the expert on this.
Oh, watch your mouth.
So how do we do this? All right. Now, before we get into you guys' own ideas on how to do this, I know there are failed programs. I know, John, you can mention some of them. You said you just want to blow up a lot of these youth programs.
Just put words in my mouth, getting me in trouble.
I know. Huh? Oh, that was okay. Not public information. Yeah.
No, yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree, because again, we're behind the curve here as church leaders, but there are a couple competing models that I want to mention, and maybe we can discuss the pros and the cons and everything in between.
If it's church as entertainment, then it's a problem, because a thoroughly secularized culture will never go to church to be entertained when the secular world can entertain us so much more.
I mean, like,
it's
way
so much better.
Mm-hmm.
They're pros at it. So if you're thinking
like, why would I go to church to see a fake Metallica concert when I can go see a real Metallica concert?
Right. I mean, cheap pizza and God's Not Dead may not be the draw that you want to tell your friends
Wait
about
a
on
minute,
Monday
our
morning.
good friend.
Are you Lenny, man, that's so scary. That's harsh. That's harsh. Don't go there.
Yeah.
I mean, God is not dead. I mean, come on. No.
Jay Warner's our friend, man.
No, I love Jay Warner. Don't get me wrong.
Rice
I'm just saying, if you're
kidding.
trying to reach out to the culture, they're going to want to see, the Avengers. They're going to.
Oh my gosh. Like, this is like a whole nother topic that we're not going to hit on tonight, but it's like, I just wish that people would stop. I'm sorry. Can I just be me?
Of course.
I wish that people would I wish Christians would stop making Christian music, Christian movies, Christian this, Christian that, and just make the best dang music, the best dang movies.
Yeah.
Because if you do that, if you focus on doing that, that's how we win the culture. That's how people are going to, it doesn't need to be
just do good work.
Excellent work. When you strive for it, like, just you do excellence. That's what we produce, not this stuff. And I mean, I read a study. I don't know if it's relevant to our conversation at all, but it was an interview with, like, across music bands that claim to be Christian bands, and it was anonymous, like, in the article. And it turns out that a lot of these bands are they're second-rate secular bands. Dare I say secular bands. They just didn't make it. So everybody knows in the industry, well, I'll just go to the Christian market because I can make it there, because the standard is less. And the same thing is true with Christian movies. Like, I mean, Courageous is a fantastic movie. I love the Kendrick brothers. They do awesome stuff, but it's not the Avengers.
Yeah.
I mean, did you guys see Spider-Man?
Oh yeah.
I mean, fantastic movie, right? Great. I mean, and Spider-Man is great, gospel message in it, I mean, that could be a Christian movie.
Yeah.
Anyways,
that's coming. But anyway,
yeah. So enough off of that high horse.
Yeah.
But somebody
that's
brought
okay.
it up.
No, that's good. Well, we were talking about two popular models out there right now, and this is more on the academic side, and I know it gets distilled eventually, but one was made popular by Rod Dreher in his book, The Benedict Option, where he pretty much advocates, and to be honest, I'm convinced that's not his main point, but many have thought and interpreted him to say that we retreat. We just retreat from culture.
I think he says we need to build parallel institutions that have a Christian focus. So homeschooling would be a really good example of this, where we can't penetrate the public school system because it's so entrenched in the political culture. You just can't. Like, in the state of California, you cannot move the needle significantly enough to stop endangering your kids. So what happens is we build a parallel system. We have the homeschooling system, which is thriving, and it can do very, very well. And in Dreher's model, what happens is, if this becomes very successful and does very well, you will see parents then drawn to it, as opposed to staying. And to some degree, especially with COVID-19, where the foibles of the public education system have been laid bare via the Zoom camera, we are seeing exactly that. We are seeing tons of people retreat and saying, we want to put our kids here because you guys are at least doing school and you're actually teaching them stuff and not just trying to rally them to specific social causes and forgetting about reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Which brings up its own concerns, right? Because so I serve on the board of directors of a small private classical Christian school, and we've seen our enrollment is through the roof.
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally maxed out. We can't take another kid because the facility won't hold another kid. We have waiting lists of 25, 30 families for each grade. But it means that we need to up our game as far as admittance and protecting and watching over who and what we're letting in. I mean, because this is how we saw the education system go kaput in this country in the first place. I mean, the educational institutions were founded distinctly on Christian principles.
The colleges specifically,
but education in general. I mean, you look to the early primers. You're teaching the alphabet to your kid by biblical analogies.
The King James Bible was pretty much the first reader that many children had in the 1800s.
That's right. So we need to make sure that we hold firm to that. So we make these distinct communities, these parallel. I like the way you said that, a parallel system or community or thing. And
so that's basically Dreyer's.
Yeah, and Dreyer reiterates that in Live Not by Lies too. The last maybe quarter of the book.
Yeah, that's another good book too. So. All right, so that's one model, but I know a lot of people again have misunderstood him to think.
Well, and you can't necessarily create, for example, a Christian university, quote unquote. That's a hard thing to start, and there is something to say that if you want to be a really good doctor, you've got to go to an institution that has really good professors and has a really good medical intern program. And it's not like we can just invent those out of air. So there's problems with that.
But that's a doctor. Most people aren't going to medical school. So if you want to be, if you want to be a radio host or an engineer, or if you want to be, I'm putting in quotes, a normal type position.
Yeah.
That broadens the possibility and makes this idea a lot more feasible.
Well, no, I'm just saying that that's one example of other. There are certain institutions that we can't just simply create a parallel version of.
The Christian university.
Yeah. It doesn't lend itself to that, and so that's the weak point of that.
And Dreyer also argues, like, what I like about Dreyer's. Can I say what I like before we get into the next system, or do you want to do the next system?
Go with Dreyer.
What I like about Dreyer's system, though, and this is the way that I take him, is it's also the idea of Christians within the context of their local communities, their local church communities. If you're a Christian businessman, you create these successful businesses with the intention of being able to hire Christian men and women to come work with you and work for you. And you create these almost self-sustaining populations, like these, it's like the Amish, right? And so when things really, like when it really hits the fan here and things in persecution really comes, we have a system that's set up in place to take care of one another. So when, Bob, that it comes to my church, he's an executive at Microsoft, and all of a sudden he's being forced to call, boys, girls and girls, boys, and share bathroom with women. He can say this isn't right, and he can stand by his convictions, even to get fired, because he knows he's got Rick, that has a software company in the church, and he's waiting in the wings to hire Bob, on. So all of a sudden you see the Christian community taking care of itself with the future in mind, with future persecution. This is my church. It's small little church. This is an emphasis that we're slowly introducing to the body, where we're trying to, if you farm, if you're an ag, let's have you start focusing on the future 10, 15, 20 years. What's that look like as far as benefiting the church?
Yeah, no, that's good. Yeah, that's good. All right, so that's Dreyer's model, the Benedict option. Let's move on to another popular option, which James Hunter wrote about, and he calls it faithful presence within. So basically, he takes that out of Jeremiah 29, 5-7. All right, so let me read the verse, because this is really what grounds his idea of faithful presence within. So the context behind this is you've got the prophet Jeremiah getting the word from the Lord and telling the Hebrew people who are at this point exiled in Babylon. So the word from the Lord is, "Thus says the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, to all the exiles whom I have sent into exile from Jerusalem to Babylon. Build houses and live in them, plant gardens and eat their produce, take wives and have sons and daughters, take wives for your sons, and give your daughters in marriage, that they may bear sons and daughters, multiply there, and do not decrease. But seek the welfare of the city where I have sent you into exile, and pray to the Lord on its behalf, for in its welfare you will find your welfare." The idea there is, let's say if you're a teacher, you're an accountant, you're a baker, you're a CEO of some company, remain there and be faithful. And like you said, do your very best. Do excellent work. So that's kind of like the faithful presence within model, as opposed to, kind of like going a parallel route. Just bloom where you're planted. So what do you guys think of that one?
Well, I obviously we're called to be faithful Christians in whatever avenue, we are to do all things as unto the Lord. That's clear. And Pauline, I don't know that you can be a faithful Christian in Google, but how much is that actually going to sway a Gen Zer who uses Google or Twitter, or what I'm saying? So there's a limited amount of function that can do. I think it's important as a witness to others within the Christian community that you can be faithful in those aspects. I think we need to be that. I don't think, like I said, we can withdraw completely. That'll never happen. But in terms of attracting Gen Zers, I don't know if that in and of itself is going to be effective enough.
Right.
I think more needs to happen. And I was listening to I was listening to a podcast coming in this evening, and one of the complaints that the atheist had, it's an atheist and a Christian guy kind of talking back and forth, and the atheist lady said the problem with evangelicals now, and she really, she was trying to be nice, but you could tell that underneath it she had some really ill feelings, because she equated evangelicals with the Trumpists. And she said, I think there's some real hateful, I see them as being hateful. I see them as being ideological. I see them as being rigid and rejecting of people and people's identities and people's values and judgmental and
hypocritical.
All of those things. And he said, well, the Christian said, well, what would it be like? What if there was a way where the Christians came back to the Jesus model, where there was radical love for neighbor? Would that be attractive to you? And she says, well, let me ask you a question. How do you get there? How does that happen in Christian circles? And that was a good question. Mm-hmm. And he started saying, I don't know, maybe it happens at a grassroots level, things like that. I think he's completely wrong. I think what's going to happen I think he's completely wrong. Yeah, no, it's not going to just some nice guys are going to get together, because we're all we're all swimming in our biases, and our culture has tainted us. But what has historically happened is the church persecuted is the church pure. And what will happen, what will be really attractive, this is honest, this is relational, this is all the things that checks off all the quote unquote Gen Z boxes, is when you are disdained by culture, and yet you turn around and run into culture anyway. Well, that's amazing. So we're talking about COVID-19. The Antonine Plague of AD 165 to 180 is a huge deal in the history of early Christendom, because what happened was, when that plague was ravaging Rome, and Rome was at its zenith, it was at its peak at that time, even the Roman nobility would leave their relatives and flee to the hillsides. And it was the Christians who were walking into the city as everybody was walking out. And nobody could figure these guys out. Now, many of the Christians did catch the plague while they were nursing the pagan Romans, back to health. And some of them died. But I think it's Rodney Stark who posits that that act may very well have been the thing that established Christianity as a major force, because A, the Christians got immunities, and B, all the people whom they helped said, hey, wow, you guys are something different. You guys actually cared about me, even when my Roman cousin or uncle or whomever fled to the hillside and left me to die. You came in and saved me. That kind of honesty and reaction in the face of, self-harm, there's nothing like it. And I think that's the kind of thing that would resonate with this culture.
That is the thing I think that's resonating with the culture, with the Gen Zs and the millennials, and because that's the narrative of these ulterior worldviews, right? Yeah. So how did the sexual revolution stick?
Yeah,
it's because this is we're persecuted, and there might be truth in that at first, but certainly now there's very little truth in that as far as I'm concerned, but you when you see those things and people standing up against the man or the authority pressing back into the establishment, that's very attractive. It's attractive to me. It is. You want to be on that side, right? Of the movers and the shakers, the people that are standing up for righteousness and goodness. Yeah. Unfortunately, in this instance, it's a lie. But I agree with you, Lenny. I think as the church falls under a deeper and actual persecution. What did you say? Persecution is the church purified.
Yeah.
And this happens and then as the church becomes purified, an onlooking world is going to see a purified church, and they're going to see things that are emulating out of that church, like love, peace, patience, kindness, gentleness, self-control. Sound familiar? Yeah. Right? These are the fruits of the Spirit, right? So that fruit is going to be emulating out into the culture, and people are going to go, I want that, because they're going to be they're in the culture of confusion, man.
It's beauty. It's
beautiful.
True beauty.
And it's true. Mm-hmm. So we got to remember here that the truth is central here.
Yeah. Truth, right? Goodness, and beauty. It hits all those aspects of the transcendental. Now, you brought up sexuality. I was thinking about this. This was one of the things that I was scratching my head about, because when I originally asked the question, how do we get a thoroughly secularized culture to understand what the sacred is?
Yeah.
And I thought about it first thought about it when it comes to regard for sex, because traditionally it had been sex was considered something that was sacred. You have two individuals who are at their most vulnerable during the sexual act, sharing with one another, right? And also they're vulnerable in the sense that it means creation of new life. There's a sacredness to creating new life, and the pledge that you will be around for the next 20 years to help raise that new life. All of that was entailed and understood. This is why when you were married, you weren't really married until you conjugated the marriage. Mm-hmm. That was the primary understanding. Now, sexual activity is recreational. It's not sacred anymore. How do we get kids to understand what the sacred is? Yeah. Well, there's something that is sacred to them that they can understand, and it's reflected in our language. Because sexuality was sacred, the F word was the mother of all swear words. Remember in A Christmas Story, I said the big one, right? The F blank, blank, blank word. That was the top swear word when we were growing up. That was it. That's not the top swear word anymore. There's another word that's worse to say than that. What's that word?
No idea.
The N word. It's so bad they don't use it in TV shows. They'll try to use the F word in movies, but they don't say the N word in movies. All right. And if you say it, even in teaching, you can say the F word all day long in a college classroom. You can't say the N word or they'll call you on the carpet. Why is the N word so bad? Because what is sacred is personal identity. And to the Gen Zers, personal identity is hallowed ground. You don't disparage someone for their race. You don't disparage someone for their understanding of themselves. Personal identity is that sacred nature. So we have to somehow communicate that idea of sacredness is not merely self-absorbed, but it actually extends to other aspects. And if we can start with that, then maybe they can understand what sacredness actually is.
I like that. And especially if you tie it to the image of God, which really at some point they need to understand that is where we ground our identity.
Right.
And then because we know that Gen Zers, they want to participate in let's say, their learning process. That's why discipleship has to be genuinely relational. It can't just be a bunch of programs and here you leave with a bunch of readings and then
we used to have one English teacher, my freshman English teacher. He would take out mimeographed worksheets every day in class, and he'd pass us out. And we'd look at each other and go, he's not teaching us. This is just busy work. It was the relational. And kids, like I said, kids get that
they do,
right away.
Especially now. They're sensitized to that.
It makes me want to think, like, if you're listening and like you're a parent or a teacher or a young adult, or somebody that can have influence on a young person's life, you want to know how to affect the generation. Is what you do is you form a relation. You find 2 or 3 of them, and you say, hey, do you want to meet for whatever, coffee, video games, whatever you can rally around, and you just start talking about worldview stuff with them, and that's what I did when I was a young pastor. I think I'm still young, but I'm getting old. But it's like when I was first a pastor, before I was at a Stand to Reason or before Soli Church, is I just grabbed young kids, high school kids. I just grabbed them and said, hey, you want to meet for coffee at Starbucks after school? Okay, cool. Let's do this. And we just would, no books, no study materials, no agenda, just like let's get to know each other and let me sow into you, as much as I possibly can. And those relationships for me are still going. And these young men are getting married and
So real relationships aren't let's have some fun together. Real relationships are when the other person, when you're just hanging with the other person and they say everything's okay, and you say no, it's not.
Yeah,
let's talk. Wait, I was supposed to have dinner with my family, but I'm coming over instead. When you put yourself out, that's where that's what Facebook and TikTok and these guys can't do. And this is why you can't do online church, because it's when, it's when you're walking in church and you look across and you go, wow, Jenny just doesn't look as happy as she should. I'm going to go over and talk to her.
Or I haven't seen Frank in 2 weeks.
You don't catch that any other way. You won't catch that online because it's easy to pose online. But when you're there, that's where relationship gets real.
Right.
And it's like, okay, no, be real with me. What's going on? That's what these kids want.
The gathering is the gathering of the church is just so incredibly important, right? It's the community of God. It's the body of Christ. It's the training ground really for the saints. It's also where we do battle. I think part of the reason why the culture is the way that it is because the church is anemic. I said this before the show. The church is sick, and the church is, I think, the local church. I really do feel like is the solution. And this, at least it's where the solution flows out of, and we have a very low understanding of what Sunday mornings actually is. It's a time when the saints of God gather corporately. The Church Catholic gathers corporately around the world to do battle against Satan. Heaven and earth are moved on Sunday mornings.
I like what you said earlier before the show started about your church. Again, this is part of how Gen Z forms their belief system and how they gravitate toward things, but they like to participate in whatever. It could be causes or in their education. In your church, John, just tell us in like a minute or less how you guys do it. How Gen Z participates.
Sure. We have no student programs. We have no midweek. We have no women's Bible studies, men's Bible studies, nothing. We do Sunday mornings to the best of our ability. And the parents are in service next to their children. My kids are in there 5 to 11. We've got high schools, everybody. And the way they participate is through the liturgy. Right. So I thought this stuff's crazy, but it's working. There's standing and sitting, right? Like the old school way, right? There's public confessions of sin where we all read things together. There's that we read a creed, right? Everybody recites the creed together. We sing corporately. We gather around the table, right? So when we do communion, we pass the peace, old school, right? Pass the peace, and that's how the kids are participating in church. My kids, well, they're growing to love it. It's hard, but other kids, the older kids, older than mine, which is the generation we're talking about, they love it, and they're literally dragging their parents to church. We're like 80% students, which is nuts.
Well, you have the last word, John. Thanks for that.
As it should be. No,
yes,
I'm just playing.
I know. We are out of time. You've been listening to apologetics.com radio, where we challenge believers to think and thinkers to believe. Our hope is that you've learned something about the Christian worldview that strengthens your faith and make you want to learn more. So special thanks to our panel tonight, John Noyes, Lenny Esposito, and our engineer, Emma, that makes all of the magic happen for us. Special thank you to our listeners. Until next time, good night, and YouTubers, don't forget to subscribe and like.
Thank you for watching this Come Reason video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see more videos like these, consider subscribing to our Come Reason YouTube channel by clicking on the subscribe button. And you can follow us on social media. Lastly, if you'd like to help keep these kinds of videos free, consider providing a donation by clicking on the donation button beside me. Thank you.